If all it is a reduction to the idea that there are no moral facts.
Things that are unjustifiable does not mean that things don't matter.
Well, it means that there's no moral facts.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does.
No, because you have to assume.
You're assuming there's moral facts.
Yep.
Do you know what a fact is?
Yeah.
What is it?
A fact is something that is real and true.
Okay, so you're making a truth claim.
Yeah, I'm making a truth claim that God exists and that he has made a real objective world with real objective moral systems. Are you not doing the same thing?
And you're assuming it.
Are you not doing the same thing?
I am. I'm here, baby. I'm right here with you.
So what, do you think that you can't state moral facts now?
I think that anything that I would state as being a moral fact now becomes unjustified. And since it's unjustified, I can do whatever the fuck I want.
Okay.
And there can be no actual objection to that now. We've destroyed all possibility for objective morality now.
No, because people have accepted that Agrippa's trilemma exists for a long time, and we still object one another. Because so you and I assume the same things.
Those aren't moral facts anymore. You don't have moral facts. You just have assumptions.
Sure you do, because God exists. We're assuming that God exists.
No. That's an assumption.
It has to be.
Then if it is and has to be, there are no moral facts.
Nope, that's incorrect because we're assuming moral objectivity.
Okay, give me a stance independent reason for the existence of God.
Sorry, a stance independent of reason?
Stance independent reason, sir.
I don't know what that means, sorry.
So give me, other than because erudite believes it, God is real.
Yeah, so I'm kind of a Thomist in this way. I think that like God demonstrates and shows himself in every part of the world. I think that he is in the design of the trees and
That's
the ducks.
A stance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need a stance independent reason.
Sorry, so you want me to not use any logic or reason for
just something outside of you, which would demonstrate this.
The Cambrian explosion.
Okay, and that demonstrates God?
I think it does, yeah.
Okay, and that's a stance independent reason.
Yeah, because the Cambrian explosion literally happened.
So therefore it's a stance independent reason?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Sure.
Okay, I just want to make sure. So your stance independent reason is there's an explosion and that proves God?
I think that's one of the proofs, yeah.
Okay, got it. And that's not your stance of that?
You're just doing like word games now.
No.
You are.
Nope. I'm just asking for a stance independent reason.
So how do you?
It has nothing to do with me.
We get to do like.
I'm with you. There are no stance independent reasons for God.
Okay, so what you're doing, I guess I need to just be meta again because we can't engage in any fucking substance in this conversation.
This is the most substantive it's been.
It's literally not substance for you to go, I guess I'm assuming the same thing as you. So you're just assuming and you're just assuming and you're just assuming and reason and logic don't exist. It's like, no, of course reason and logic exists.
Where do they exist?
Out there. You can.
Where?
But math tautologies. Humans don't create math tautologies. They exist regardless of whether or not I want to engage with them.
Where?
2 + 2 = 4, always.
Where?
Out there.
Where's there?
2 ducks and 2 ducks = 4 ducks.
Yeah, but where's that?
The material world.
In the material world?
This is what I mean, by the way, when I say that he's just trying to do word games now.
How is it a word game?
It's necessarily a word game because everything that I am saying is completely reasonable, coherent. You're just trying to make it seem absurd. That's what you're attempting to do.
How am I making anything seem absurd?
This is obviously what you're attempting to do because you, A, will not allow me to internally critique you in return and show the audience, for example.
You've convinced me. What do you mean?
No, I have not convinced you. And I'll just take it. I'll just grant that I've convinced you.
You've convinced me.
But you're not letting me internally critique you now.
Go ahead, internally critique me.
Okay, so how do you believe, like, why do you believe in God? What do you think is good?
Because I assume him.
Okay, but why do you assume that it's good?
Because I assume it.
So you just assume it?
Yeah.
So it's just preference?
Yes.
So there's no moral objective fact?
Correct.
So you don't believe in any moral objectivity?
Yeah.
Okay, so when other Christians insist that there's moral objectivity, what would you say to those Christians?
I would say that they're wrong.
Oh, okay. Is that what you're actually going to say to people going forward?
Of course.
Okay, so you're looking at the camera right now and you're telling all of your Christian followers that
Erudite has convinced me that the Christian position is that there are no moral facts. Yes.
Okay, wow. I don't believe that there's no moral facts, but that's fine that you
don't?
Yeah, I assume that there are.
Oh, and you assume that there's moral facts.
Yeah.
So therefore there are?
By the word games that you're playing now, sure.
So you assume that there's moral facts, so therefore there's moral facts.
I believe that God is real. I assume God is real, and I don't think that God lies to us.
So you believe that there's moral facts because you believe there's moral facts.
And I have evidence for that.
What?
Math.
Math is an evidence of a moral fact? How?
Because it exists outside of us.
Well, how would that be evidence of a moral fact?
Because something that's objective has to occur outside of my mind. So regardless of whether I'm observing or engaging
how would that show a moral fact, though? Even if you could demonstrate math occurred outside of
weren't-
the human minds.
We were just talking about facts, but sure, in the case of like a moral fact, I would point to, say, for example, emergent universal values. Seems like over time, universally, what has emerged is people valuing sanctity of life. And I think that comes from God, because I think God is good.
Okay, got it. But that's just an assumption, right?
That one. Thank you so much.
How would that be a moral fact if the foundation's assumed?
Because you can build on top of your axioms.
Yeah, sure, but they're just assumed. So how could it be a fact?
Because I think that God objectively exists.
Yeah, but that's just assumed. Again.
How do you solve this?
How could that be a moral? I just told you I'm a Christian, now a Christian moral anti-realist. You convinced me of that through your argumentation.
So I think facts exist, and I can point to evidences like math, like tautologies.
Yeah, but that doesn't prove that there's moral facts.
So I think there are also moral facts like kindness is good.
How's that a moral fact?
Because I think that no matter where you look, kindness is viewed as good. We appreciate kindness. I think that it is something that God decrees.
If everywhere you looked, people were like molesting children, would that then be a moral fact that you should do that?
No, Andrew. Are you tracking this conversation?
I'm trying to.
Why would you ask that
Because
question?
when you just say, I observed that some people reciprocate kindness, that doesn't demonstrate how kindness is a moral fact.
I didn't say that some people reciprocate kindness. I said that kindness seems to emerge as a value overall. And I think that God specifically likes things like kindness.
So kindness is an emergent property?
Of God's will, yeah.
Okay. How is kindness a moral fact? You ought be kind.
Because God decrees it.
But you just said God's assumed.
Yeah, you have to assume God at some point. But I think that he's objective.
So then if you assume God...
Look, you're the Christian anti-realist. I'm not.
Yeah, but you haven't told me why I'm wrong.
Yeah, so I believe in God because of a process mostly of like personal experience, right? He has shown himself to me, which is why I assume this preference of God is a fact. You're saying, well, if I can't prove God, I guess, what? Do you think he doesn't exist?
Well, no, I just don't think that there's any moral facts because
Well, if you
we're
assume that
operating
God
on an
exists,
assumption.
that could be a moral fact, right?
No, that wouldn't be a fact.
So you don't think God exists?
Those would be, when you're talking about universals like moral facts, right? You're saying that this is indeed universally always true.
No, that's no, that's not the same thing as a moral fact.
Okay, what's a moral fact?
So a moral fact would be something like justice exists, and we can.
That would be a universal claim.
Outside of us, yes.
That's a universal claim.
No, that's not an absolute claim. That's a.
I didn't say
claim.
absolute. It said universal.
Yeah, universal is the same thing as absolute, right? So the way, hold on,
what?
the way that justice looks in different contexts are different, right? Justice in the case of somebody.
Different contexts are different.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a little like redundant when I said that, but yes, the point still stands.
Okay, so I'm confused.
Do you need another beer
When
to
you say
relax?
justice exists, are you saying that justice? You're saying that's not a universal claim?
I'm going to put this as far away from my pen as possible.
Keep it far away. Keep it far away.
Say that
Because
again.
a moral fact would be universal, wouldn't it?
No,
Then how would it be a fact?
because something can be objective and relative. Welcome to
Okay.
Aristotle.
Okay, so help me out here. When you say something's a moral fact, what does that mean?
What I mean is that God created it, and it exists outside of us. Because
And ought
God
people
exists.
adhere to what God says? And ought people adhere to what God says?
Ideally, yeah, I would like that, but they don't all agree with God.
Okay.
But my preference is God, obviously.
Okay, but it is a moral fact that they ought to,
Yeah.
based on your assumption of God. Okay. So I still don't understand how we got to.
I know you don't understand.
How we get to.
You're making that very clear that you.
How
don't
do we get to
understand.
moral realism from this?
Okay, because I think God is true. Do you think
Yeah.
God is true?
Sure.
Do you think God exists outside of you?
Sure.
If you didn't exist, God would still exist.
I think that. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Great.
There's your first.
But that
basis.
doesn't.
That's your axiom.
I don't understand though how we get to moral realism.
Well, because if God then says love exists,
Yeah.
okay, then love must exist because God said love exists.
Sure.
So our axiom is God exists, and from that God says love exists. So unless we think God is a deceiver, which would be a different belief system, but you and I don't think that. We think God is telling the truth.
Okay.
Then love exists. But the way love looks, hard to know. We have to do a little bit more work to figure out what love looks like.
Okay.
Yeah, like what does loving
How
your
do we
wife
get
look
to
like?
How are we getting to moral facts though?
Love is the moral fact
How?
because God says that love is good.
Okay, so the thing that you assume becomes a fact because you assume it.
Well, it's a fact because part of the assumption is that God exists outside of me.
So you assume God, and so therefore, because you assume God, now we have actual moral realism.
I assume the existence of God, correct? Yes.
So if somebody assumes not God,
then I would fight with them.
Yeah, I get that you would oppose that, but how do you do that with an unjustified axiom?
Reason.
Yeah, reason.
Yeah.
Why, if reason reduces...
Do you think reason just stops existing because Agrippa's trilemma exists?
Yeah, if reason reduces down to cannot be justified, then why do I care if when we get to your pillar, you just say, because I assumed it?
I'd say, it's obvious that you care, man. Look in your soul. God put it there. You do care. You do care.
Gotcha.
That's why we're all here. That's why we're talking about what's right or wrong, is every human has this universal predilection to seek right and wrongness. And in fact, even when moral anti-realists insist that there's no such thing as truly right or wrong, and they insist on these things, the moment that you put them in a pragmatic situation where they have to act as though that's true, they don't. They act as though moral facts exist. And that would be my evidence of saying, see, moral facts do exist. I'm more right than you are. I'm more reasonable than you are. My argument is more compelling than yours.
So it just comes down to what most people would do?
No.
Well, if it's a moral fact and you say most people would just do this thing, and so it seems like an emergent property,
well, I think that God put, like, do you think that God put his spirit in us?
Well, it's your view.
I'm asking, do you agree?
Why does it have to do with me?
Because I'm assuming that we both agree to this?
I'm saying there's no moral facts at all. There can't be. Because any pillar I have to base them on is completely unjustified.
Exist. So you don't think God exists?
No, if I assume that God exists, right, and then I assume that assumptions cannot be justified.
Well, one of your prompts. What is one of your prompts here? Christian ethics is superior. How is it superior?
Oh, well, I just think it's better because it's better.
How though?
Yeah, because it's better.
Can you make an argument for it?
Sure, because it's better.
In what ways?
The ways in which it's better.
What do you mean by better?
The same thing you meant by better.
No, not necessarily. Can
Whatever
you
that is.
What do you mean by better?
I don't know. I think outcomes for people, they like it better.
Okay, well then why did Christians like power get shirked off by the people?
It didn't. What do you mean?
Well,
right now there's a bunch of people who are proposing that Christians retake power. What are you talking about?
Yeah, and there's not a lot of political will, thank goodness, behind them, right?
But if there was, why? I still haven't actually heard an objection for it.
Yeah, I would say that people did want to shirk it because of Western liberal democracy.
But Western liberal democracy allows the conditionals for Christians to do it.
Yeah, then Christians still shouldn't.
So then I still don't, I've never...
It would be more ethical for a Christian to not do it.
I guess back to the heart of it, now that we're tying it all back in, what is the objection to Christians utilizing the framework of the Constitution to take over and amend the Constitution?
It's unchristian. I've already said this.
Oh, why is it unchristian?
Because I think that the faith itself, Jesus was not political. I think there is a typological argument for over time we see a complete reduction of statehood and priesthood, and it separates entirely to the point that in the typology of Jesus, we see him rejecting being a king, rejecting statesmanship, and refusing to make a physical kingdom on earth. And we have it through multiple verses, which we can get to if you want.
Okay, well, let's get to them.
Okay, so John 18 is a good example. My kingdom is not of this world. If it was, my servants would be fighting. And this is when he's talking to Pontius Pilate. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's a good example of him saying, I'm not a politician. I'm not a king. And if I was, there'd be civil war. But I'm not this thing. So Jesus says, I am not a political figure.
Is Jesus God?
Yeah.
Okay, so when God anointed...
You just assume that?
When God anointed kings, was he doing something wrong?
No.
I'm super confused. Why would Jesus anoint kings?
Jesus didn't.
Jesus is God.
So why did he? Because I don't think humans were ready for a secular state, a state where Christianity is separated from church and state. I think it took us a long time to get there.
So God was anointing kings and putting them in charge of entire kingdoms based on the fact that he thought that humans weren't ready to not have kings?
Yeah, for the same reason that like before we get to like certain parts of the Old Testament, men could have many, many wives. And then over time that got reduced because God's like, look, you were blind then, now you know better, now you can't do this thing, right? We've seen this. So why was it permissible for people to have multiple wives for some time, and then at some point in the Old Testament that got barred? Do you know why?
How come post Jesus we still had kings in Christian lands? If God had changed his mind about, having kings, why did he continue to allow there to be kings?
Because humans can sin.
So it's sinful to have a king?
I would say it's heretical to engage in politics, yeah, as a Christian.
As a Christian?
Well...
Do you engage in politics
hold on.
as a Christian?
Let me correct that statement. Not engage in politics, specifically to rule from a Christian ethics, to say, I am God or inspired by God, and therefore my rules come from God, and you must listen to my Christian rules. I think that's wrong for Christians to do.
So when someone's a politician who's a Christian, they shouldn't make any legislation based on their actual moral purview of Christendom?
They can do it on their moral purview, but they shouldn't do things that blend, that like merge church and state together. So saying...
Well, hang on. now you've just made a different statement. You just before said that it's sinful to rule from Christian ethics.
Yeah, in specific ways, yeah.
So why would it be sinful so it would be sinful for a politician to utilize Christian ethics to promote legislation?
No, I said in specific ways. So one specific way would be, for example, forcing non-Christians to observe the Sabbath or Lent, forcing non-Christians to do that from like a state level. I think that would be wrong for Christians.
Yeah, but that has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but so there are
engage with that.
So there are forms of Christian ethics which you can impose on people?
Well, you shouldn't impose it because it's specifically Christian ethics, but you might agree.
Why not?
Because, again, you shouldn't impose Christian ethics on non-Christians.
Why not?
Jesus doesn't do it.
Yeah. Wait a second. I'm confused. You're saying that the apostles, that when they were, let's take Paul, for instance.
Sure.
Okay. When Timothy, you're obviously you've read Timothy, right? Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with what happened with Timothy in the cult of Artemis?
Is this like pop quiz style debating, or is this okay?
No, I'm actually asking.
Okay.
Are you familiar with what happened with the cult of Artemis?
Nope, I'm not.
No. Okay. So
Do you want to tell me, though?
I'm going to tell. Yeah, I'll tell you. The cult of Artemis.
By the way, that's how you react to these types of questions, is normally admitting when you don't know things.
So anyway.
Just as a heads up.
Okay. Anyway, the cult of Artemis was a fertility cult. And it was essentially really pissed off that Christianity was taking off. Mm-hmm. And it was because they had a silver trade. And that silver trade, they were making basically mock statues of their religious figures.
Okay.
And so they were doing everything that they could do to undermine Christianity. And a lot of them, because it was a fertility cult, had priestesses. And they were trying to subvert Christianity, which is where you get 2 Timothy saying that I don't like it when women speak in church, right? Mm-hmm. The whole idea there was that a lot of these women were fertility cultists, and Timothy was asking for help. But at that time, Timothy had a massive flock and was definitely, because they were diametrically opposed to the government as persecuting Christians, was definitely ruling the Christians. Definitely ruling them.
Are you saying, so they rejected Roman occupation, they were shirking it, and they were only imposing Christian law, or were they telling Christians how to act? Because telling Christians is totally fine. A church, like the Pope, telling fellow Christians how they should conduct themselves is exactly what the church should be doing. But the church should not be going, hey, secular people, you have to do this same stuff too. That's not what the Pope should be doing.
Yeah, so when there's a policy like women cannot speak in this church, they can't do that, okay? Is that a command?
From what?
Is that a command from a bishop or a priest or something like this?
It might be.
How are you not ruling?
Because it's not, your church isn't a state. Like, you can just leave that church, right? You can say, I'm not of the faith anymore. I reject this. Whereas if the Roman occupation says you must pay your taxes, what happens if you don't pay your taxes?
What happens if the Roman emperor converts to Christianity?
Then he began to impose Christian ethics through fiat, which I think was wrong.
Yeah, but why? But what would make it wrong?
I think that like the whole principle of the faith is regeneration. And I don't think that regeneration and legitimate salvation occurs when fiat imposes Christian ethics on you, which is why I actually think that blending church and state is so bad for the faith. Because I think what it does is that A, when you force it upon people, it makes people hate faith. And B, nobody gets to actually personally know and understand God by and large because they're being forced to it. This is actually what makes Christians very different than like Muslims.
So,
Muslims believe, for example, that you can act according to the faith and you can be saved. Christians would say you can do every single thing you were told to act like a Christian, but if your heart isn't regenerated, if you don't believe in God and have a personal relationship, you are not saved.
So let me just talk briefly.
Sure.
I just want to make sure that because I'm not strawmanning your position, I want to make sure I got it right.
Appreciate that.
Christians are in power. They should not directly appeal to Christian ethics for the things in which they prescribe in policy.
Didn't say that. They can appeal to Christian ethics. What they can't do is impose specific Christian ethics onto non-Christians.
Okay, so they can't, if they had a law, for instance, like, I don't know, no prostitution. And that's purely informed from their Christian ethics,
Well,
not from empirical data or anything like that. They should not actually impose that in law.
They can impose it if they think it would actually be good for the betterment of people, but I don't think that they should impose it if like there's a large consensus of the population that vehemently opposes that and would not elect for it.
Okay, but let's just assume it's not a democracy.
I am assuming it's a democracy.
Yeah, but let's assume it's not.
Okay, in an authoritarian regime, are Christians acting ill all the
If a
time?
Christian
Yes.
says,
Yeah, I think that would be bad.
Yeah. Okay. So Christian says there's no prostitution allowed.
Yeah, I think theocracies are bad.
Yeah. Okay. But anyway, so if he says,
This is answering your
if he
question.
says no prostitution's allowed, right? Let's say you agree with everything else that he says, right? What would make you specifically disagree with him appealing to Christian ethics for the imposition of no prostitution?
Well, as a Christian, I probably wouldn't disagree with him, right? Because we share the same Christian ethics. The issue is that there may be a non-Christian in that state that does disagree and is now being forced to do it only and exclusively because of Christian ethics. Now, if the Christian found like statescraft argumentation for why we shouldn't have prostitution, like for example, it leads to high levels of STIs and the abuse of women, then that might be something that could be, in my case, collectivized and worked towards to oust. But again, I don't really believe in authoritarian governments. I think that they're very bad, just generally. Yeah.
So do you agree that fathers and mothers have rule of their household?
Yes.
Yeah. Would you advise then that a father who had no empirical data to tell his daughter not to be a prostitute, but only relied specifically on Christian ethics to say that to her and then impose that as a rule is doing something wrong?
What's the difference between a father and a state?
Yeah, I'm going to
No, I'm asking you. That's my response.
Oh my God. Your response is a question?
My response is this is disanalogous. What's disanalogous between these two things?
Well, because I asked you about politicians, you said no.
Sure, I'll say fathers aren't statesmen.
So that's okay for them to do it?
Potentially, yeah, within their household, yeah. As
Within
long as it's
their
not
household.
abusive. Yeah, as
Okay.
long as they're not being abusive.
Why is it wrong for them to do it at the state level?
Because at the state level, that's not what the church is for. Statescraftmen is for politicians, and church things
The
is for...
state is also there, or the church is also there to help with
It's
moral
funny.
information.
The Eastern Orthodox agrees with me, right? Symphonia.
Yeah, Symphonia is a blending, actually. It's a blending of church and state.
Okay, so you're saying they don't disagree with me, which would probably explain why, like, the Russian Orthodox Church is such a bastardization of the faith.
The Russian Orthodox Church?
Yeah, I mean, we know, for example, what Kirill is not excommunication, but he's basically just not talking to the church because they allowed Ukrainians to have their own Orthodox church, the ecumenical patriarch, right? And the reason that they did this is because Kirill, who's just an ex-KGB agent, is insisting that the Russian war is a holy war, right? So, yeah, if it's the case that Eastern Orthodox actually is for this and they want to go back to the Byzantine, I'd say, well, it makes sense why Eastern Orthodox is such a weak branch of Christianity.
Okay, but I don't.
And Russian Orthodox is the worst version.
I don't know
of it.
what this has to do with the view. Exactly.
Okay, Russian Orthodox is a great example of why church and state shouldn't be blended, right? So what happened to the Russian Orthodox Church? When the Tsar was there, he was good about respecting the church.
And then
He let them
communists
exist.
killed him?
Not just killed them, replaced 50% of the clergy with KGB members.
Yeah, after they killed them.
Yeah, which is awful, right?
And were the communists secularists?
But then the communists used the
communists
Russian
were
Orthodox. Hold on, he
secularists.
doesn't want to get to the last point. The communists used the Russian Orthodox Church because they actually put in place clergy that are KGB members, and they warped the Russian Orthodox Church. And unfortunately, because the Eastern Orthodox Church is so traumatized by the schism between Catholics and them, they wouldn't even excommunicate the Russian Orthodox Church that had been
Are
completely
you saying
killed
that
off.
there was KGB agents at the time of Tsar Nicholas?
No, I didn't say Tsar. I said
Then-
in communism.
Yeah, so then 'cause the communists killed Tsar Nicholas and then imposed communism after that.
They also
They were
killed a
not
bunch of the
infiltrating
clergy.
the church with KGB agents at the time of Tsar Nicholas.
I
That
didn't
was
say
not
that they
happening.
were. Tsar Nicholas wasn't when communism existed.
Yeah, communism definitely existed. Yes, it did. There was all Marxism, and yes, that ideology existed.
he was
I
a
don't know what
king.
you're talking about. Yes, it did.
Wait, the ideology existed, but Stalin, like when we're talking about communism, we're talking about Lenin-Stalinism, right?
Yes.
Okay, so Stalin, I believe it was Stalin that killed 50%.
Well, we're also talking about Marxism.
Well, when I'm talking about Marxism as like a state, I'm talking about this specific state.
Yeah, but we're talking about the ideology of Marxism.
No, I'm talking about the Russian state that
Yeah, the Russian state, which was secular, came from communists, killed
That-
Tsar Nicholas.
killed 50% of the clergy and then replaced that
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
clergy with their own people because
Yeah.
they recognized that the
After
torch...
they killed them.
Yeah.
Secularists killed the Christians, not the other way around.
Then they used the church and implanted their own state members into the church
Yeah,
to
so what?
That's a good example of how the state corrupts
The
churches.
reason that, no, that would be the opposite. What happened is that the church was doing what it was supposed to do, and they fucking killed them, and then replaced the people within that structure.
True,
They
and they're
did
still
that-
replaced to this
they
day
did
because
that-
Kirill was
they did-
found to be
no.
an ex-KGB
First of all,
agent.
First
Yes,
of all,
he was.
No,
He absolutely
no,
was.
the Eastern
absolutely
Orthodox
was.
Church, the Eastern Orthodox Church, has determined that the Russian Church is in communion with them.
In communion, but the issue, so that they're willing to still talk to them. The issue is that the patriarch Kirill will not talk to them because what happened is the patriarch, what is it, Bartholomew the First, I think, right now, Bartholomew and the Ecumenical Council,
The
or whatever.
ecumenist Bartholomew?
Yep, they gave autocephaly to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which means self-governing for those who are not like EO words. And this made Kirill so mad because he's so in line with Putin and insisted that the Ukrainian war is a holy war that he stopped talking to all of them. But all the ecumenical, they oppose what Russia is doing insofar as they allowed Ukrainians to self-govern away from the Russian Orthodox because they recognized that there was a problem here.
Yeah, but this
is a good example of why church and state should
I don't
blend.
understand. Your example of why church and state is bad is because secularists can come in and kill the members of your church and then replace them with people who aren't real Christians.
My argument.
That's your argument.
No. Do you want it? Did you want to steel man my argument? Do you need me to
Yeah,
explain it
here's
to you again?
your steel man argument.
No,
is
you're about
if,
to straw man.
If
No,
state,
stop. You're a straw man.
how do you know? I haven't even made the argument.
Your tone. I can tell. Okay. Here's the actual argument that I'm making.
Okay.
I'm not saying that the state was bad, that the blending of church and state is bad because the state came and killed. I said what's bad is that they later then used the church as an arm of the state. So they blended church and state. They used Kirill and other people to impose theological law that was just sympathetic to communism because the state utilized this. And what happened is when 50% of the clergy got killed and replaced by statists, which were not clergymen, the Eastern Orthodox Church wouldn't even excommunicate that church despite the fact that their theology changed dramatically, significantly, and has maintained that to such a point that Eastern Orthodox didn't even send people in to correct the theology. Do you think that the church would remain what it is supposed to be? Yes, I'm moving my hands. Very exciting, Andrew. Do you think that the Russian Orthodox Church would be what it is if the KGB hadn't killed 50% of it and removed it? This is why, by the way, the separation of church and state is valuable. It protects the church and it protects the state.
How is the separation of church and state protect us from communism?
Because it doesn't allow communism to utilize the church as a statecraft.
It doesn't need to. It can just take over the state.
Yeah, that would be bad.
Yeah, but it can do that within your liberal framework, no problem.